Hi guys, how's it going? Miller here. Finally managed to get these finished. I'm hoping, the final entry for Wargamers Anonymous for August. As I said to you guys before, these are my Dragoons, Colonel Loki's Dragoons for the English Civil War. As I said to you before in the previous video, the Dragoons in the English Civil War were used a lot differently to Dragoons in the later periods like Napoleonics and a bit later than that maybe. So they were more used for picket duty when not in battle. They were used for pickets and for small-scale skirmishes. This more seemed to be more of a special forces, because they were more used for raiding and taking of bridges or holding bridges, things like that. Get in, do what they needed to do, and get out quite quick, sort of thing. Because they were more mounted infantry, so they could get in close, get what they needed to do, get out with any supplies or anything like that. Then they were also used for escorts, so for baggage trains and looking after, I'm guessing, high-profile characters. So, as I said, these are Colonel Loki's. Originally, they were part of 3 or 4 different armies. So there's parts of, they were formed from Waller's, Essex's, and Manchester's armies when the forming of the New Model Army, and they were formed in April 1645. And from there, they saw small skirmishes. From then, so they saw some skirmishes in Islip, Bampton in the Bush, and Radcote, along with obviously other little raids. And on the 14th of June, a big battle, which many of you might have heard of, Battle of Naseby. They had a big role in that. They were obviously from the start of the battle, they were made to flank down the side, left-hand side, down this bush or row of hedges, and fired into the side of Prince Rupert's cavalry, causing chaos there. And then obviously when the lines started pushing forward later on in the battle, as the Royalist infantry started to fall back, they famously charged. Now, Dragoons weren't known for charging, they were more infantry, so obviously them charging wasn't expected, and it didn't win the day, but it definitely helped towards the Royalists withdrawing. From then on, after the battle, they moved on for a Western campaign, so they fought most of the battles in the Western campaign and all of the skirmishes. And then the next year, in 1646, they came and started on an Eastern campaign, and they were involved in the sieges of Oxford and Worcestershire, up until near enough the end of the Civil War, First Civil War. So I know they're meant to have been some changes. So in 1648, Captain Edward left the parliamentarians and ran away. He took a troop of horses, or a couple of troops of horses, and he ran away to Scotland. And then, which was probably a bit bad, I suppose. So obviously half the Dragoons are gone then. And between May and August, the remaining troops saw battles in the eastern areas. So they saw one in Colchester, which is obviously one I'm quite interested in. What would it be? Only a few miles up the road from me. And yeah, so then so that was obviously from June until August, and then to the end of that year, when the Second Civil War ended, Oki took part in the trials of Charles I, which obviously saw him found guilty and sentenced to death. And Oki actually was one of the men who signed the death warrant, which was obviously quite a brave thing, because you're signing to agree regicide, which I suppose it's quite frowned upon, really. I mean, you couldn't imagine sentencing the royal family to death now, could you? Or at least the king or queen. And then from then on, a year later, 5 of the troops, I think there's about 10 troops at this time, and 5 of the troops were disbanded from Colonel Oakey's regiment and were formed into a new regiment under Colonel Daniel Abbott's, and they went off to serve in Ireland. And then about 1650, what with them having so few troops or less troops, they were ordered to raise another 500 or 500 men, but it was quite quickly the order was rescinded, so they never ended up ordering more. And then another two troops were taken by Cromwell to Ireland, but because Cromwell had them turned into horse, so they were just horse and no longer dragoons by then. So obviously Colonel Oakey has the remainder of his dragoons up until they go to Scotland, and in September they take part in the Battle of Dunbar. And then the remainder of the troops, while they're in Scotland, become horse as well. So now they're no longer, Colonel Oakey's dragoons are no longer dragoons, they are normal horse. So sort of like the Ironsides that you can imagine, as opposed to anything like this. So while they're in Scotland, they take part in the sieges of Stirling Castle and Dundee. And then they stay in Scotland until about 1654, where Colonel Oakey loses his command, because by this point Cromwell has become protectorate. He's not king, he doesn't want the crown, but he becomes a sort of king, which is a protectorate, and he doesn't agree to this, Colonel Oakey, so because of that he loses his commission. And he doesn't really come back until 1659, when James I, I think it's James I, I could be wrong, comes back. Obviously Cromwell's dead by this point, and his son has lost the protectorate, and James I comes in, which I think is Charles I's son. I could be wrong. And then not long after that, so that's in the March, that's I think in the November, I think it was, and then by the March Oakey's been replaced by a Colonel Rossett, and then not long after that, I think by the November, so obviously in the March it's under a new command, and then by the November the regiment itself is disbanded. So what was Colonel Oakey's regiment to begin with was no longer his by 1660, and was no longer a regiment at all by then. But yeah, if you've managed to sit through all of that without me trashing it, like I said, this is my entry for August. I didn't get round to doing the dismounted versions of them, but hopefully I'll get round to them at some point. I'm hoping next month that it's infantry or something that I can do for me Wars of the Roses, because I've been itching to do it, and what with the lack of time I have nowadays, I can't do this and other stuff at the same time. So I think I've heard a rumour that Phil will be taking bribes. So if anybody doesn't want to do anything they don't want to do, I'm pretty sure it'll take a bit of a donation, and he might sway his decisions. Or yeah, so fingers crossed next month is something that I'll be a lot more interested in doing. But yeah, so that's it for now. Long video, long rant, but hope you enjoyed it, hope you like the figures. Bye for now.